The courtroom was cold and quiet that morning. The soft hum of the ceiling fans mixed with the sound of papers, shuffling and whispers among the people waiting for the judge to arrive. In the middle of that heavy silence stood a young girl named Maya Johnson, only 14 years old, dressed neatly in a plain blue dress. Her small hands clutched a folder so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Inside that folder were papers, notes, and documents she had been studying for weeks. The only thing she believed could save her father. Her father. David Johnson sat beside her, looking tired and defeated. He had been wrongly accused of theft from the store where he worked. It was a misunderstanding, one that spiraled into a serious case because of false statements and a careless investigation. Maya knew her father was innocent. She had seen the fear in his eyes and the way people treated him differently ever since the accusation. To her, this day was not just another hearing, it was a battle for her family's honor. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The sound of his shoes echoed on the polished floor. He was an older man, strict-looking, with glasses that rested low on his nose. Maya had never been in a courtroom before, and everything about it felt intimidating. The tall wooden benches, the sharp smell of polished wood, and the weight of so many eyes watching. Yet, despite her fear, she sat straight, reminding herself why she was there. The case began. The prosecutor spoke first, explaining the accusations in a calm but cold tone. He made David sound like a criminal, a man who had betrayed his employer's trust. Maya's chest tightened as she listened. She wanted to shout that it was a lie, but she bit her lip and waited. Her father looked down, his fingers trembling slightly, and that sight made her heart ache. She had never seen her father so broken. When the judge turned his attention to the defense side, Maya's father's lawyer stood up. But the lawyer seemed unsure and unprepared. He fumbled through his notes and avoided eye contact with the judge. Maya realized then that if someone didn't speak up, her father might lose his case because no one cared enough to fight hard for him. Her mother, who had passed away years ago, had always told her the truth only matters when someone is brave enough to speak it. Those words echoed in her mind. Maya's heart raced as she raised her hand slowly. The courtroom turned silent for a moment as everyone looked at her. The judge frowned. "Yes." "What are you doing, young lady?" he asked in a slightly irritated tone. I would like to speak for my father, Your Honor," Maya said, her voice trembling but clear. Gasps filled the room. Some people laughed quietly. The judge blinked in disbelief and leaned back in his chair. "You must be joking," he said. "This is not a place for school projects, young lady. Sit down." The laughter grew louder. Maya's cheeks burned red, but she didn't sit down. "Please, sir," she said, her voice now steadier. "I've read the case files. I found something important. My father is innocent, and I can prove it." The room went silent again. Even the lawyer stopped fidgeting and looked at her. The judge sighed and rubbed his forehead. "You've read the case files?" he asked, almost mockingly. "Do you even know what evidence means?" Maya nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Evidence means proof, something that supports the truth. And I have it." The judge chuckled and shook his head, clearly amused, but also slightly curious. "You're a brave one, aren't you? But this is not a game. Sit down before you embarrass yourself." His tone was sharp, but Maya stayed where she was. Her heart pounded so hard that she could hear it in her ears, yet she refused to back down. At that moment, she wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. She was her father's voice, the only one left, willing to fight for him. The judge gave a disapproving look and turned to the lawyer. "Control your client's daughter," he said coldly. But David reached over and touched Maya's hand gently. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to do this." She looked at him with tears in her eyes and whispered back, "Yes, I do." The judge noticed their exchange, and something about Maya's determination made him pause. "Fine," he said finally. "If you think you can impress the court, you'll have a chance to speak later. But remember, this is not a playground. One wrong move, and I'll hold your father in contempt." His voice echoed sternly through the courtroom. Maya nodded and sat down. She didn't smile or look scared. She just looked focused. She opened her folder quietly, flipping through her neatly written notes. Every paper inside represented a night spent reading, learning, and searching for answers while everyone else slept. As the trial continued, Maya listened carefully to every word spoken by the lawyers, the witnesses, and even the judge. She noted each contradiction, each detail that didn't add up. Every time someone mentioned something wrong, her pencil moved quickly around her. People whispered and stared, wondering who this young girl was and why she cared so much. But Maya didn't care about their whispers. She had only one goal: to make sure the truth came out. The tension in the courtroom was like a storm waiting to break. And while no one realized it yet, the little girl sitting quietly at that wooden table was about to change everything. The next morning. The courtroom was more crowded than before. Word had spread about the brave young girl who dared to speak up to a judge. Some people had come just to see her. The air buzzed with whispers, some calling her the bold little lawyer, others shaking their heads, thinking she was foolish for even trying. When Maya walked in beside her father, she could feel the stares. She held her folder tightly again, but this time her steps were steadier. She had stayed up most of the night reviewing her notes. Reading court terms she barely understood but forced herself to learn. Her eyes were tired, but her heart burned with determination. The judge entered, his black robe flowing behind him. He sat down, straightened his papers, and then looked directly at Maya. "Miss Johnson," he said with a hint of sarcasm, "I trust you've decided to let the adults handle things today." A few people chuckled. Even the prosecutor smiled smugly. Maya looked down for a second, then raised her head. "No, Your Honor," she said quietly but firmly. "I'm ready to present what I found." The judge sighed loudly, clearly irritated. "You're a child," he said. "This is not a school debate. Do you even understand how serious this is?" "Yes, Your Honor," Maya replied. "It's serious because an innocent man could lose everything." The courtroom fell silent again. The confidence in her young voice surprised everyone. Even her father looked at her in disbelief. The judge's eyebrows furrowed as he leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "You really think you can argue law with me?" he asked, half amused, half annoyed. Maya took a small breath. "I don't want to argue, sir," she said softly. "I just want to tell the truth." The judge chuckled. "The truth? Do you know how many people say that in this courtroom every day?" he asked. "You've read a few papers and suddenly think you're a lawyer." His tone carried mockery, the kind that stings, the kind meant to humiliate. People in the courtroom laughed again, louder this time. A man in the back whispered, "She should be in school, not court." Another said, "Poor kid, she doesn't know how the world works." Maya's cheeks turned red, and for a moment she thought about sitting down. But then she remembered her father's trembling hands and his quiet apology from the night before. "I'm sorry, Maya, that you have to go through this." No, she wouldn't let that be the end. She looked straight at the judge and said, "With respect, Your Honor, I might be young, but that doesn't make me wrong. My father didn't do what they said he did, and I can prove it." The laughter stopped instantly. The judge's smile faded. "Prove it," he repeated, narrowing his eyes. Maya nodded. "Yes, I checked the store's security record. The time they said he was at the register doesn't match the camera footage. Someone changed the time in the police report." A low murmur spread through the room. The prosecutor frowned and shuffled his papers, looking uncomfortable. The judge's expression hardened. "Enough," he said, raising a hand. "This is highly irregular. You are not authorized to speak on behalf of the defendant. Sit down." Maya didn't move. Her heart pounded, but her voice didn't shake. "Then I'm speaking for myself," she said, "because this is my father, and I have the right to tell the truth." The judge slammed his gavel once. Bang. The sound echoed sharply. "Order in the court," he commanded. His eyes glared at Maya, filled with disbelief and annoyance. "You are walking on very thin ice, young lady." But to everyone's surprise, Maya didn't flinch. Instead, she said quietly, "I'm just asking you to look at the evidence." The silence that followed felt heavy. Even the guards near the door stopped moving. The judge sighed again, this time deeper, as if unsure whether to scold her or admire her courage. "You've got spirit. I'll give you that," he muttered. "Fine. Show me what you think you found. But if this turns out to be nonsense, I'll remove you from the court immediately." Maya nodded and stepped forward, holding out her papers with shaking hands. Her father tried to stop her, whispering, "Maya, don't. Please." But she just gave him a small smile, the same gentle smile her mother used to give when she believed everything would be okay. The judge glanced through the papers, his expression unreadable. The prosecutor leaned over, trying to peek at them, clearly nervous. After a long pause, the judge spoke slowly. "This document. Where did you get it?" "I requested it," Maya replied. "The store manager gave me a copy because I told him the times didn't match the report, and you compared it yourself." The judge asked. "Yes, sir," she said simply. "And the report's timestamp is 37 minutes off from the real footage. That means my dad couldn't have been there when they said he was." The judge leaned back, looking stunned. The entire courtroom buzzed with whispers again, this time not mocking, but amazed. He looked at the prosecutor. "Is this true?" he demanded. The prosecutor hesitated, flipping through his notes, his face turning pale. I'll have to verify that, Your Honor." The judge's eyes narrowed. He turned back to Maya, studying her carefully. For the first time, the tone in his voice softened. "You said your name is Maya Johnson, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." He nodded slowly. "You're a remarkable young lady. I can't allow you to act as a lawyer, but I will review what you've presented." For a second, Maya thought she saw something change in his expression, a flicker of respect, maybe even guilt. The session was adjourned. But everyone knew the atmosphere had shifted. The same people who had laughed earlier now looked at her in silence. Even the judge avoided mocking her again. As Maya sat down beside her father, he whispered, "I'm proud of you." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "We're not done yet, Dad," she said. "But I think we just took our first step toward the truth." And though the judge had ridiculed her, everyone in that courtroom knew. The little girl with the trembling voice had just shaken the ground beneath their feet. That night after court. Maya sat at the small wooden table in her living room. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking every second she spent reading and thinking. Her father had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from the long day, but Maya couldn't rest. Her mind was racing with everything that happened, the laughter, the judge's mockery, and the surprise on everyone's faces when she revealed the evidence. She opened her folder again, spreading all her papers across the table. There were pages of printed reports, notes written in her neat handwriting, and a USB drive with security footage. Each piece of paper told a story that no one had cared to read properly. She stared at them, whispering softly to herself, "There's still something missing, something they're not seeing." Maya had learned to think like this from her mother. Her mother, Angela Johnson, used to work as a paralegal before she passed away when Maya was 9. She used to sit with Maya and explain simple things about the law, how truth always has proof, how small mistakes in paperwork can change everything. Maya could still hear her mother's gentle voice saying, "Always read the fine print, sweetheart. That's where the truth hides." So that night, Maya did exactly that. She went through every page, every line of the case file, searching for clues. Her father's case seemed simple on the surface. He had been accused of stealing money from the store safe during his shift. But Maya remembered something strange. The time on the security camera footage didn't match the time in the police report. She had already shown that to the judge. Now she wanted to know why it didn't match. Hours passed, and the house grew quiet, except for the sound of pages flipping. The warm yellow light from the lamp made her shadow dance across the wall. Suddenly, Maya stopped. Her eyes widened as she spotted something in the police report, a small detail that didn't make sense. The officer's signature on the report was dated 2 days before the incident even happened. Her heart started beating faster. "That's impossible," she whispered. She compared the date again, checking the time of the alleged theft. The report claimed her father was caught on tape on the 12th at 9:45 p.m. But the officer's notes were signed on the 10th. How could someone write a report before the crime even happened? She said softly to herself. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Something was wrong, not just a mistake, but something deliberate. She grabbed her notebook and started writing everything down. Names, times, dates. All the inconsistencies. Just then, her father stirred on the couch. "Maya, you're still awake?" He asked sleepily. "I'm fine, Dad," she said, forcing a small smile. "Just checking something." Key sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "You shouldn't be worrying about all this. The lawyer will handle it." Maya shook her head. "No, Dad, he's not handling it. He barely spoke in court today. If we don't fight this ourselves, they'll just call you guilty and move on." David sighed deeply. "Sweetheart, you're just a kid. This isn't your fight." "But it is," Maya said firmly, her voice trembling. "You taught me to stand up for what's right. Mom would have done the same. And I think someone's lying." Her father looked at her for a long moment, then lowered his eyes. "You sound just like your mother," he whispered. "She never backed down either." Maya smiled faintly. "Then I'm doing something right." The next day, Maya went to the store where her father worked. The manager, a kind old man named Mr. Harris, was surprised to see her. "Maya, what brings you here?" "I just need to ask something," she said, holding out a page from the police report. "Can you tell me who was working the security system on the night of the 12th? Mr. Harris scratched his chin. "That would have been Mark, the assistant manager. But he quit right after your father got arrested. Didn't even collect his last paycheck." Maya's eyes widened. "He quit?" "Yes. Disappeared the very next day," Mr. Harris said, shaking his head. "Didn't even leave a number." That confirmed it. Someone had framed her father, and whoever it was had already run away. Maya thanked Mr. Harris and hurried home. She replayed the security footage again and again, this time paying attention to the reflection in the glass door near the register. On the third replay, she noticed something small but shocking. The man opening the safe wasn't wearing her father's blue work jacket. The reflection showed a white sleeve. Her father always wore navy blue. Her eyes widened. "It wasn't him," she whispered. "It was someone else." She took screenshots from the footage and printed them out, circling the reflection. Her hands trembled with excitement and fear. This was it, the proof she needed to show the judge. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be easy. She was just a kid, and the courtroom didn't believe kids. She had to be smart, careful. That night, she packed her folder again, now heavier, with new evidence. She looked at a photo of her mother on the shelf and whispered, I think I found what you wanted me to find. Mom, the next morning, when Maya walked back into the courtroom, she was no longer the nervous girl who stood there days ago. She had a calm fire in her eyes, the kind that comes from knowing the truth. The judge might have ridiculed her once, but now Maya carried something stronger than fear. She carried proof, and the truth was about to shake the courtroom in ways no one expected. The courtroom was full again the next day. The air was heavy, thicker than before, as though everyone could feel that something important was about to happen. The murmurs of people echoed off the tall walls, bouncing between the wooden benches. When Maya walked in, her folder hugged tightly to her chest. The crowd quieted for a moment. They remembered the girl who dared to speak against a judge. Some still thought she was foolish. Others had begun to believe she might actually be right. Maya took her seat beside her father. He squeezed her hand gently, his eyes full of worry. "You don't have to do this again, sweetheart," he whispered. But Maya only smiled softly and said, "I do, Dad. The truth won't speak for itself." The judge entered, serious as ever. He banged his gavel once, and the courtroom fell silent. "Let's continue with the case of David Johnson," he announced. His eyes drifted briefly toward Maya, a flicker of curiosity hidden behind his stern expression. The prosecutor stood up first, confident as always. He began talking about facts, about evidence, and about how David Johnson's guilt was as clear as daylight. Maya listened carefully, her small hands gripping her folder tighter with every word. When the prosecutor finished, the judge nodded. "Defense." David's lawyer stood up, but before he could even speak, Maya rose slowly to her feet. The room froze. She held her folder close, her heart pounding like thunder. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear but gentle, "I have something new to show the court." The judge frowned. "Miss Johnson, I told you yesterday, this is not a place for children to play." "I'm not playing," Maya said quietly. "I found new evidence. It changes everything." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The prosecutor crossed his arms, looking irritated. The judge hesitated. He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You have 1 minute," he said finally. "If it's nonsense, I'll end it right there." Maya nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened her folder. "Thank you, Your Honor." She took out 2 printed images, screenshots from the store's security footage. The judge leaned forward, curious despite himself. Maya handed the papers to the bailiff, who brought them to the bench. "These are from the security camera on the night of the alleged theft," she said. "Look closely at the reflection on the glass door next to the safe." The judge adjusted his glasses. The reflection was faint, but clear enough to show a man's arm reaching for the safe, and the sleeve was white. "My father's uniform jacket is blue," Maya said. "The man in the reflection is not him." A wave of whispers spread through the courtroom. The prosecutor's confident face suddenly turned pale. "That doesn't prove anything," he snapped quickly. "It could be a lighting issue," or Maya interrupted softly but firmly. "It's not. The same camera shows my father walking in 5 minutes later, wearing his blue jacket. The times don't match the report. And the officer's report was signed 2 days before the theft even happened." The judge's head shot up. "What did you say?" "The police report," Maya repeated. "It's dated 2 days earlier than the incident. That means the report was written before the crime occurred." The judge looked down at the file in front of him. His face tightened. He turned to the prosecutor. "Is this correct?" The prosecutor stammered, "It must be a clerical error, Your Honor. An error?" The judge repeated sharply, "You expect this court to believe that a report was prepared before the crime happened, and that's just an error?" The courtroom went completely silent. Even the air felt frozen. The judge leaned back in his chair, his eyes now fixed on Maya. "How did you find this?" "I just read everything carefully," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "My mom taught me to never ignore the details. She used to say the truth hides in small things." The judge was quiet for a long time. His expression softened a little, though his voice remained stern. "Miss Johnson," he said finally, "I underestimated you." The prosecutor tried to speak again, but the judge cut him off. "No, you will re-examine this evidence immediately. Until then, I am suspending this hearing." The crowd burst into whispers again, this time not with laughter, but with amazement. People turned to look at Maya with wide eyes, the girl who had faced down a courtroom of adults and forced them to listen. As the judge left the bench, Kea exhaled deeply. Her knees were shaking, but she didn't show it. Her father turned to her, eyes wet with tears. "You did it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You actually did it." Maya smiled faintly. "Not yet, Dad," she said. "But we're closer." That evening, as the news spread, people began talking about the girl who had found what trained lawyers had missed. Reporters started calling her the little lawyer. But Maya didn't care about that. All she cared about was her father's freedom and making sure the truth could no longer be ignored. And though she didn't know it yet, that day was the moment everything changed. The courtroom that had once mocked her now respected her. The same judge who had ridiculed her now listened to her words carefully. Maya had turned the whole case around, not with power or authority, but with truth, courage, and love. The next court hearing came faster than anyone expected. The city courthouse was packed, even more than before. Reporters waited outside with cameras ready. Everyone wanted to see the little girl who had challenged a judge and shaken an entire courtroom. Some came out of curiosity, others out of disbelief. Maya and her father walked in quietly. David wore the same old brown jacket he had worn to every hearing, but this time he didn't look defeated. His shoulders were straighter, his steps more confident. And beside him walked Maya, not with fear, but with quiet power. Her small fingers still clutched that same folder, now worn and creased from being opened and closed too many times. When the judge entered, the courtroom immediately went silent. His face looked more serious than ever, but this time, there was no mockery in his eyes. Instead, there was a faint trace of curiosity, maybe even respect. He glanced at Maya for a second before beginning the session. "Court is now in order," he said firmly. "Before we proceed, the court has reviewed the evidence presented in the last session, specifically the security footage and the police report." Everyone held their breath. Maya's heart raced. Her hands felt cold, but she kept her chin up. The judge continued. "The inconsistencies in the timestamps and the officer's premature report have raised serious concerns about the validity of this case." He turned his eyes toward the prosecutor. "Mr. Daniels, do you have an explanation for these errors?" The prosecutor, who had always looked so confident before, now appeared pale and nervous. "Your Honor," he stammered, We are conducting an internal review. It appears that the evidence might have been tampered with." The judge interrupted sharply. The prosecutor swallowed hard. "It's possible, Your Honor." A low murmur filled the courtroom. People began whispering. The reporters scribbled notes furiously. Maya could feel every heartbeat echoing in her ears. The judge leaned back, looking tired but calm. Tampering with official evidence is a serious crime. Whoever did this has not only wronged Mr. Johnson, but also insulted this court. His voice grew colder. "This is not something we take lightly." Then he turned toward Maya. "Miss Johnson," he said slowly, "please step forward." The room went quiet again. Everyone's eyes turned to the small girl walking up to the witness stand. Her shoes clicked softly against the marble floor. She looked so small compared to the tall wooden podium, but her presence filled the room. "Yes, Your Honor," she said softly. I have reviewed your findings, the judge continued. You were correct. The footage and the report contradict each other. Tell me, how did you find all this? Maya took a small breath. I just looked closely, she said. I watched the video over and over. I noticed that the reflection in the glass didn't match my dad's jacket. And when I saw the date on the police report, it didn't make sense. I knew something was wrong. The judge nodded slowly. And you discovered this on your own? Maya nodded. Yes, Your Honor. My mom taught me to always check everything carefully. She used to work with lawyers before she passed away. The judge paused for a moment. His eyes softened slightly, though his voice remained steady. You have your mother's wisdom, Miss Johnson. You've done something even trained professionals failed to do. The courtroom erupted in quiet whispers again, this time full of admiration, not mockery. Even the defense lawyer, who had barely spoken throughout the trial, looked amazed. The judge looked back at the prosecutor. Mr. Daniels, do you have any further evidence to present? The prosecutor hesitated, flipping through his files, but his hands were shaking. No, Your Honor, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The judge nodded once. Very well. Based on the evidence reviewed, this court finds that there is insufficient proof to proceed with the charges against Mr. David Johnson. The room froze for a heartbeat, and then gasps filled the air. David Johnson's eyes widened as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Maya turned toward him, her mouth slightly open, tears welling in her eyes. The judge continued. This case is hereby dismissed. Mr. Johnson, you are free to go. The sound of the gavel striking echoed through the room, a single, powerful bang that seemed to break every chain around them. David covered his face with his hands, tears rolling down his cheeks. He turned to Maya, pulling her into his arms. You did it, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice shaking. You saved me. Maya hugged him tightly, her face pressed against his chest. No, Dad, she said softly, smiling through her tears. The truth saved you. Around them, people began clapping softly. It started with one person, then another, until the whole courtroom erupted into applause. Even the bailiff, usually stone-faced, smiled slightly. Reporters whispered words like unbelievable and incredible courage. The judge banged his gavel again, but this time he didn't sound angry. Order, he said, hiding a faint smile. Miss Johnson, the court owes you thanks for your persistence. You have reminded us all why truth and justice matter, no matter who speaks it. Maya's cheeks flushed pink, but she bowed her head politely. Thank you, Your Honor, she said quietly. As she and her father walked out of the courtroom, the crowd parted for them. People whispered words of admiration that little girl's a hero. She's going to be a lawyer one day. Unbelievable bravery. Cameras flashed, but Maya didn't care about the attention. She only cared that her father was free and that her mother's words had come. True. Truth always finds a way to speak. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt brighter than it had in weeks. David knelt down beside his daughter, holding her shoulders. I don't know how I'll ever thank you, he said. Maya smiled up at him. You already did, Dad. You believed me. He hugged her again, and for the first time in months, they both felt peace. The fear, the shame, the pain, all of it washed away, replaced by pride and love. And as they walked away from the courthouse, hand in hand, Maya looked back one last time. The building that had once felt so cold and cruel now stood behind her, silent, humbled. And changed, little did anyone know that the girl who had been ridiculed just days ago had just made history. Asterisk. The sound of the judge's gavel still echoed in Maya's mind as she and her father stepped outside the courthouse. The bright sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel harsh. It felt warm, like freedom. The crowd outside was already waiting. Reporters surrounded them with cameras and microphones, voices overlapping. Miss Johnson, how did you find the evidence? David, how does it feel to be free? Maya, do you want to be a lawyer one day? Maya blinked, startled by all the attention. She wasn't used to flashing cameras and people shouting her name. She just wanted to go home with her dad, sit at their small kitchen table, and breathe. But before she could answer, her father gently pulled her closer. Shielding her from the crowd, "Please," he said softly, his voice shaking. "She's just a child." The crowd quieted a little. The reporters lowered their cameras, realizing this moment wasn't about fame, it was about love. David looked at his daughter, tears filling his tired eyes. "You saved me, Maya," he whispered. "You saved our family." Maya smiled shyly. "No, Dad," she said. "I just told the truth." They started walking down the courthouse steps. Every step felt lighter, freer. The same people who once whispered behind their backs, calling her father a thief, now looked at them with respect. Some even clapped as they passed. A woman in the crowd said softly, "That little girl did what grown men couldn't." David paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. The air felt different now, clean, like the weight on his chest had finally lifted. He looked down at Maya. "You know," he said quietly, "your mom would be so proud of you right now." Maya's throat tightened. She looked up at the sky, blinking back tears. "I hope she saw it," she whispered. "I did everything the way she taught me." They walked home slowly, passing familiar streets that had once felt cold and unfriendly. People who used to avoid them now smiled or nodded. Some even waved. It was strange. The world looked the same, yet everything felt different. When they reached their small apartment, Maya set her folder on the table one last time. It was full of creased papers, handwritten notes, and highlighted lines, the same folder that had once been her only weapon in a battle against disbelief. She stared at it quietly, then smiled. "We don't need this anymore," she said softly. Her father laughed weakly. "I think you just retired from being my lawyer." Maya grinned. "Maybe, but if someone else ever needs help, maybe I'll come back." He chuckled and shook his head. "You really are your mother's daughter." That evening, they cooked dinner together, just rice and chicken, but it felt like a feast. They talked and laughed until their stomachs hurt. For the first time in a long time, their home was filled with joy instead of fear. After dinner, David turned on the TV. The news was already covering their story. "A 14-year-old girl defends her father in court," the anchor said. "Judge overturns wrongful charges after young girl exposes evidence error." Maya blushed when she saw her name on the screen. "They make it sound like a movie," she said, giggling. David smiled proudly. "Maybe one day they'll make one about you." But Maya just shook her head. "I don't want to be famous, Dad. I just want people to know that truth matters." He nodded slowly. "It does, and you reminded them of that." Later that night, Maya went to her room and sat by the window. The city lights twinkled below, and the stars above looked brighter than they ever had. She thought about everything: the courtroom, the laughter, the fear. And the moment when the truth finally won, she whispered softly, "We did it, Mom." In her heart, she felt peace, the kind of peace that comes when you've fought a hard battle and finally won. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The judge himself came to visit. Maya was sitting on the porch steps, drawing in her notebook, when a black car pulled up. The tall figure stepped out, the same man who had once ridiculed her in court. David came outside, confused. "Your Honor?" he said. The judge smiled gently, removing his glasses. "Mr. Johnson, Miss Johnson." He paused for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I owe both of you an apology." Maya looked surprised. "An apology?" He nodded. "When you first spoke in my courtroom, I saw a child where I should have seen courage. I was wrong to mock you, Miss Johnson. You reminded me of what justice truly means. Maya blinked, unsure what to say. Thank you, sir, she finally whispered. The judge smiled faintly. You have a gift, Maya. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're too young to make a difference. The law needs people like you. With that, he tipped his hat and left. Maya watched the car disappear down the street, still too amazed to speak. Her father laughed softly. Looks like you impressed the judge after all. Maya grinned. Maybe just a little. That night, before going to bed, Maya wrote something on a small piece of paper and pinned it above her desk. It said, "Courage doesn't come from age, it comes from truth." And from that day on, whenever she faced fear or doubt, she looked at those words and remembered the courtroom, the laughter that turned into silence, the disbelief that became respect, and the day justice was finally restored. She didn't know what the future would bring. But one thing was certain, the world would never forget the girl who stood up in court and changed everything with her truth. Asterisk weeks passed after the courtroom victory, but the story of Maya Johnson, the young girl who defended her father, didn't fade away. It spread faster than anyone expected, first through local news, then through national headlines. Everywhere she went, people whispered her name with admiration. In her small neighborhood, Maya had once been just another quiet student, the girl who helped her teachers carry books and spent hours reading instead of playing. But now, people greeted her with smiles. Strangers stopped her father in the street to shake his hand and say, "Your daughter gave us hope." Still, Maya didn't feel like a hero. She didn't want fame, interviews, or cameras. All she wanted was for people to remember why she did what she did. For her, it wasn't about proving herself. It was about proving the truth. One afternoon, a teacher from her school invited her to speak at an assembly. Maya hesitated at first. She wasn't used to speaking in front of so many people. But her father smiled and said, "Just tell them the truth, the same way you told it in court." So, on a bright morning, Maya stood on the school stage wearing her simple blue dress, the same one she'd worn the day she first faced the judge. The auditorium was packed with students, teachers, and even a few reporters sitting in the back. Her hands trembled as she held the microphone. When the room grew quiet, she took a deep breath and began, "I'm not special. I was just scared of losing someone I love." But when you know something is wrong, you can't just stay quiet. Even if people laugh at you, even if they say you're too small or too young, you have to stand up for the truth. Her voice cracked slightly, but her eyes stayed strong. "I learned something in that courtroom," she continued. "Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what's right, even when you are afraid." For a moment, no one moved. Then the entire room burst into applause. Some teachers had tears in their eyes. Even the principal stood up, clapping proudly. After her speech, a little girl came up to Maya, maybe 9 or 10 years old, clutching a small notebook. "Maya," she said shyly, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Maya smiled, kneeling down so their eyes met. "Don't be like me," she said softly. "Be better. And never be afraid to speak up when something's wrong." That small moment stayed with her forever, the way that little girl looked at her with hope and belief. It made Maya realize something. Her story wasn't just about one courtroom or one case. It was about anyone who had ever been silenced, anyone who had ever been told that their voice didn't matter. In the weeks that followed, Maya received letters from people across the country, teachers, parents, even other kids. Some wrote that her bravery gave them courage to fight injustice in their own lives. One man said he reopened his brother's old case because of her story. Another young girl said she decided to study law because Maya showed her that the truth can come from anyone, no matter their age. Every letter made Maya smile. Sometimes she read them out loud to her father at night, and he would listen quietly, his eyes shining with pride. "You've changed more lives than you'll ever know," he told her once, but Maya just shook her head. "I didn't change lives, Dad. The truth did. I just helped people listen to it." Months later, she received an envelope in the mail. It had the official court seal on it. Inside was a short handwritten note from the judge. It said, "Dear Miss Johnson, you reminded this court that justice is not about power, it's about fairness. Never stop believing in the law, and never stop believing in yourself." Judge Harrison. Maya held that letter for a long time. It wasn't just paper, it was proof that even the hardest hearts could change when faced with honesty and courage. Years later, people would still talk about that case. Some called it the Johnson miracle. Others called it the day the court listened. But to Maya, it was simply the day she learned that even one voice can turn the world around. Every time she walked past the courthouse, she would stop for a second, look at those tall stone steps, and smile. The place that once made her feel small now reminded her that courage has no size, only purpose. And sometimes, when the evening breeze swept through their little apartment, she would imagine her mother's voice whispering, "I'm proud of you, my brave girl." Maya would smile softly and whisper back, "I just followed your advice." Mom, always read the fine print. From that day forward, her story became more than just news. It became a lesson that echoed through classrooms, families, and hearts across the country. People remembered that day, not just as a story of justice, but as a reminder that the truth, once spoken, can never be silenced.